All right, let's continue with a little tutoring here. What are we up to? So last time we did ecology. Let's do a little chemistry. So in chem, basic chem that you need to know is the atom. And know that atoms are the basic unit of matter. Matter is anything that takes up space and has mass. What else? So know the structure. Inside you have protons and neutrons inside the nucleus like this. And on the outside you have electrons that fly around. Know their charges, so protons are positive, electrons are negative, neutrons have no charge. I drew 2 electrons here because this atom is neutral. There's 2 protons and 2 electrons, so it's totally neutral. Remember, if we lose one of these electrons, like let's kill that one, we now have a positive charge on this whole atom right here, and so we call that an ion. And ions are written with little charges on top like that. So those are called ions. Any element that has lost or gained electrons. This one's lost, that one's gained. What else? Also know their locate. I think I said that, but that these guys are in the nucleus and that the electrons are flying around on the outside. Actually, let me not erase that. Let me use that to tell you that isotopes. Isotopes are versions of an element that have extra or less neutrons. So I'm going to draw a couple of neutrons in there. So this one's a little heavier now. So isotopes have a different number of neutrons. Okay. So we have charge. The only other thing is bonds, the types of bonds. So ionic bonds are bonds which, where elements have charges. So salt is an ion. This is the sodium ion, and this is the chlorine ion. And these 2 ions are attracted to one another because of their charges. So they will attract one another and then hook up together like this. And that's called an ionic bond. A covalent bond is basically when 2, like this. Now you don't need to know this Lewis stuff and all that. All you need to know is that like oxygen and hydrogen are sharing electrons in this bond. So, and you don't need to know anything about, remember, like octet rule and all that stuff. Just basic, which is covalent bonds are where 2 elements share electrons. Okay, so just kind of know its definition. Organic molecules, they're the 4 types of molecules we find in life. Oh, and just a quick thing on chemistry, sorry. I just remembered compounds versus element. Don't worry about mixtures, but element, remember, we know elements like hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. What other ones are famous for you? Carbon, gold. We said gold, okay, which is AU. Anyway, stuff like that. So those are elements. And then compounds are any elements that are bonded together. So water, CO2, etc., etc. Okay? So that was something else that was in chemistry. Organic molecules, you have your carbs. Remember, your carbs are for energy, and it's your sugars and starches. Also know the word saccharide. Saccharide, remember we had disaccharide. Ooh, I spelled that wrong, sorry. Saccharide. These are disaccharides, polysaccharides, anything like that is a carb. Your lipids are your fats and your waxes. Okay. Ooh, sorry. Fats and waxes, what other things? Proteins is your other organic molecules. Please know they're made up of amino acids. And know that long chains like this, long chains of amino acids compose proteins. And proteins do a bunch of things. For one, they build up our bodies, they make traits, they make enzymes, which are proteins, antibodies are proteins. So, but this definitely, if you're gonna know one thing, know that proteins are made up of amino acids. And if you gotta go backwards a little bit, the thing that makes amino acids, remember, is the DNA code. So if you had a bunch of letters together of DNA, these are the nitrogenous bases like this, we said that the genetic code, every 3 letters in DNA codes for an amino acid. Oh my God, AIA. So remember that. That's something else to know about when you see the word amino acid on the final, it may be asking you about like that it makes proteins, but it also may be asking a DNA question. So every 3 letters codes for amino acid, and those guys hook up together to make long chains that make proteins. Okay, what else? And then the other organic molecule is nucleic acids. And as soon as you see Na, that's DNA and RNA. Remember, you can have 2 kinds of RNA. You can have mRNA and you can have tRNA. mRNA is called messenger RNA. Remember, it's the one that copies the code. So if you had cat, mRNA copies what goes with that, like this, GUA. And then tRNA is bringing over the amino acid that matches whatever mRNA made. So tRNA is transfer RNA. And you can practice these in our Quizlet definition stuff, okay? Cells, definitely know what a eukaryotic cell looks like. Eukaryotic cell is this is an animal eukaryotic cell. A plant one obviously would have a cell wall like this, and also have a nucleus. But remember, eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. Prokaryotic, or like bacteria, they don't have a nucleus like that. But eukaryotic cells have organelles, and the famous ones, I mean, we went through a bunch of them, but the basics, ribosomes come up a lot because they make amino acids, which are, make our traits and everything. So ribosomes are pretty popular. So know ribosomes, protein maker, and know the mitochondria. So if you see a picture of a mitochondria like that with the wrinkles, that's the one where cellular respiration takes place. Chloroplast, if you see one of those, that guy has like a bunch of stacks like this. That's a chloroplast. And that's where photosynthesis happens. So those are kind of like the organelles you need to know. That's pretty much it. Also know the DNA obviously is in the nucleus. So that takes care of that. The cells, we talked about diffusion a lot. Just remember, diffusion is high to low. So if you had a bunch of dots in here and just one outside and diffusion happens, these molecules will move out from high to low, okay? Energy, just remember energy comes in the form of ATP. And ATP, remember, is a 3-phosphate group thing that becomes ADP, which is our energy, sort of the molecule uncharged and then charges again. So ATP is charged, just remember ADP is not charged. Digestive system, just know the famous organs, like the small intestine is where nutrients get absorbed, and the large intestine is where water gets absorbed. Know the pancreas is the one that controls our blood sugar, and that the liver is where this one controls the blood sugar with insulin. Remember, insulin is released if we need to drop our blood sugar, and glucagon is released if we need to raise our blood sugar, okay? So that was the pancreas. And the liver is where we store our extra sugar, okay? That's in the liver. Respiratory system, just remember the alveoli is where diffusion takes place. That's pretty much it for that. Circulatory system, there's no heart on the final. Pretty complicated to know all the parts and all that stuff. So know the general purpose of the circulatory system, and it's to transport materials. I think that's pretty much it for those 3. Yeah, make sure you study your digestive diagram. If you're going to see a diagram, it'll probably be digestive system. What else? Okay, reproduction. All right, for reproduction. Okay, so know the word gametes. Know the word gametes are sperm and egg are gametes. Know the word haploid and diploid. So these cells are diploid cells because they only have half the chromosome number in a full set, which is your diploid number. What else? Know the female reproductive system with the menstrual cycle and some of the hormones. What else? Not too much male parts. Testes is the location of where sperm is made. But we didn't really put too much detail in the final on like all the, because we just basically had an assessment on this, so really know the general reproduction. So like gametes, any reproduction stuff you'll see, a lot of it is related to evolution. So just know that organisms that are best adapted to their environment reproduce and pass on their genes. So a lot of reproduction stuff on that. I don't have the final in front of me, so I'm trying to think of what else is on there. Gametes, sperm, egg, mitosis, meiosis. So know the ultimate purpose. Remember, mitosis is one cell going to two, that they're totally exactly the same, okay? So, but meiosis is one cell becoming usually four, not always, but you don't really need to know, remember that it's four, but what you do need to know is that this cell right here is totally different than the parent, and that has half the chromosome number. We should also review that too, like here's chromatin, here's a chromosome, here's a chromosome that is replicated, here are some genes, okay, those are genes. Here's a homologous pair. I'll draw the... These are the same genes, but if you notice, drew them in different sort of shapes because they're different alleles. Alleles are versions of traits. So this could be like brown fur and white fur. So this animal is like brown fur, white fur, big B, little b. So those are alleles, which reminds me, be able to do a Punnett square. So remember, this is heterozygous. This is two heterozygous parents. This is a homozygous dominant parent. This is a heterozygous kid, and this is a homozygous recessive child, or rabbit, or whatever. Okay, so those are the kind of basic genetic things you need to know. Know the DNA letters. So A goes with T, C goes with G, and you should be in good shape. No amino acid coding or any of that crazy stuff. Like we played that game in class. You don't need to know that. Phases of mitosis. You don't need to know the phases of mitosis or meiosis. We just assessed you on that. So anything that we ask about that would be very basic. What else on genetics? I said Punnett squares. Know that sex-linked traits. Sex-linked traits are, if you remember, it was like this is a female who's she's carrying a trait. It's any trait that's carried on the X. So that's a sex-linked trait. What else? Genetics, DNA, RNA, mutation. Oh, mutations. Okay, so we talked about mutations when we talked about evolution, how that can change allele frequency. But we said the mutation has to be special. So remember, if an organism like this fly gets a mutation from UV rays or some kind of chemical on their body, remember their children will not have that mutation unless the mutation's in the gametes. So the mutation has to be able to be in the sex cells in order to be passed on to the baby, so they'll have that weird mutation too. If the mutation's on just the body of the organism, they're going to be the only one that has it. So make sure you understand that. And evolution. So evolution is what we talked about last and didn't assess you on. So the things you need to know the most are, the first thing is how we change allele frequency. So that just means like how does a population go from having one allele like this is the frequency of that? How does the allele frequency change? Like how can it change like all of a sudden it's like different? This population is totally different now. So the allele frequencies can change. The first way is like randomly. So the first one is mutation. That gives you brand new weirdos. Okay, so all of a sudden you can have one that's like this. Okay, so we have an allele frequency that's changed because of the mutation. Random, weird, could be good, could be bad. Next, genetic drift. Genetic drift. So genetic drift is if we just take this, oops, let me take these weirdos. If we just take these guys and put them in a population brand new, then there'll be no little black ones. It'll just be striped and white. So this new allele frequency is based on a random movement, and that's called the founder effect. And that was the one we talked about with the Amish people. That's the founder effect. And now if all of a sudden we just, let me just delete all that. Oh gosh, I'm going backwards, but I just want to show you, I'll just use this population over here. If all of a sudden there's some kind of like volcano craziness, kaplooey, and this lava wipes out everybody. So now the populations that will repopulate will totally be like this, and that's called the cheetah effect. No, it's called bottleneck, okay, population bottleneck. So that's 2, and then the last one is natural selection. So that was genetic drift. Oh, the other one was migration, but I don't think that's on the final. It may be a choice on the final, but migration is, again, migrations, let me just draw migration just in case. I can't remember if it's on there, but let's pretend there's more white ones in this population. If a random group migrates to a brand new area, it's going to start changing the allele frequency because they moved into the new area, and so their genes are in there. So that's migration. And the last way, and remember, these are new ways that you learn. Most people learn only the last one, which is natural selection, and that was Darwin and Wallace. Natural selection. Natural selection is, and I'll redraw this mess of fictitious dot creatures. If you have an island and you've got a variety of species, even the striped one, let's just pretend, and we'll make that one black, and something happens, like all of a sudden there's sort of more black rocks because of pollution, then whoever's best adapted to the environment will survive and pass on their genes. That's natural selection. Whoever's doing the best will survive, get food, and reproduce. And so that's the theory of natural selection described by Darwin. And then we said there were different types of selection. So let's say that there's a range here. So we go from white to like stripy gray to black. Okay, so these are all the same population. They just have different alleles. So this population could be best to be gray, being black and white is bad, and that's called stabilizing selection. Stabilizing. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is where one extreme is totally awesome, like being dark is best, and that's directional. And the other one is where the 2 extremes are picked, where it stinks to be striped or gray, and that's called disruptive. Okay, so just remember, you know, the 3 types of natural selection, like that. After we talk about types of selection, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, yes, sorry, proof of evolution was the last thing we talked about. So the first thing is, remember, if you look at a whale and look at a person, you can actually see the same structures, the same bones, even though their fins and hands look totally different. If you look and compare the bones, they have a lot of similar bones. And what does that prove, if we ask you? Well, what it proves is they both shared a common ancestor. So make sure you know that. Anything where 2 organisms have similar, it's share a common ancestor. So that was proof number 1. The other thing was fossil record. Fossils is another proof. Embryology was another one. You can actually look at the embryos of fish and look at the embryos of humans. Oh my God, it looks nothing like that. And they share a lot of the same structures. We have a tail, we actually have gills, okay? And again, the reason why, what does that prove? It proves this. I mean, this is the proof. It proves that we shared a common ancestor at one point with these organisms, okay? So that's embryos. DNA is another one. You can actually look at the DNA sequences of organisms. So genetic information, DNA. And then you can compare the anatomy of certain creatures that are unrelated. And the famous one is shark and dolphin. If you look, oh my God, those are like the worst pictures ever. Shark and dolphin, which these don't look like at all, but they are unrelated. One's a fish and one's a mammal. Although they were related a long time ago, but dolphins were very wolf-like, okay? They actually originated from someone on land, organism on land, and fish did not. So what this proves is both are gray, both have a dorsal fin, both have a pointy nose, and that's because of their environment. So that's a different reason, not shared a common ancestor. If organisms look very similar and they're unrelated or shared a common ancestor a long time ago, it's their environment that makes them look the same. So the same reason green bugs and green snakes both have green skin / exoskeleton. The reason they're green is because they share a common environment. Okay? What else? The beaks, finches, that is an example of, that proves that the environment can shape different beaks. So that was sort of like Darwin's natural selection. So that too is proof of evolution. And I think that's it for now. If you have any questions, you can email me. And good luck, guys. Okay?